converting to Islam, French professor of astrophysics, reveals scientific facts from the Koran. French astrophysicist Professor Bruno Guiderdoni is a convert to Islam. He revealed scientific facts related to the Holy Koran, which are directly related to current world conditions. Professor Bruno, who converted to Islam, said that a Muslim must believe in the uniqueness and miracle of the revelation of the Quran. Not to forget, the prophethood of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam must also be believed by Muslims. He explained that the Quran is Kalamullah, which was revealed using human language so that it can be understood by all Muslims in the world, even though it uses Arabic. In fact, during the time of the Prophet, the structure of the Arabic language was quite complicated. However, this is the privilege of the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to humans. Through Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the words of Islamic teachings can reach Muslims in all corners of the world. The most important language issue is the pamphlet. The breath from his treatise people call him blessing, intercession, prayer, vibration contained in the Al-Quran, said Prof. Bruno, quoted from the Barat Bershahadat YouTube channel. Indeed, there are many different interpretations from scholars. However, this should not need to be debated anymore, because what is most important is the meaning of the Quran itself. As Professor Bruno put it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose a certain environment. Then He chose words, sentences, symbols, images, and natural laws that were understood by humans at that time. Until finally, Muslims at that time were able to understand the meaning of the Quran regarding monotheism and the purpose of human creation. It didn't stop there. The knowledge continued to spread until now. We don't need to debate it anymore, because the most important thing is the pamphlet, said Prof. Bruno. Professor Bruno explained that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deliberately revealed revelations in stages, so that humans would remember that everything in this world is His creation. Because Allah is all-knowing that His servants often forget the purpose of their creation. Allah said He would create a caliph on earth. That is why many revelations came down, because humans often forget the purpose of their creation, he said. Professor Bruno emphasized that the Quran does not contradict its universal character at all, because the universal character itself comes from the Quran. Of course, people will not know this if they do not study the meaning of the Quran itself. Absolutely not. Because the universal character comes from the treatise, said Prof. Bruno. Meanwhile, to understand the meaning of the Quran, Muslims must at least understand the conditions when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down His revelation, or what is often called Asbabun Nuzul. If not, Professor Bruno ensures that there will be many wrong interpretations regarding the verses of the Quran. Unfortunately, the internet media, which should make it easier to understand the meaning of the Quran, has actually made contradictory things related to Islam more widespread. As a result, people find it difficult to differentiate between true and false knowledge. Even so, humans, especially Muslims, must continue to try to learn more deeply and know the correct meaning of the Quran. Otherwise, there will be many errors in interpreting the Quran, said Prof. Bruno. Bruno Guiderdoni, French Muslim astrophysicist who converted to Islam. Bruno Guiderdoni is one of the famous French Muslim intellectuals, a prominent astrophysicist who converted to Islam approximately 15 years ago. He studied physics and astrophysics at the University of Paris and received a doctorate there in 1986. Currently, 2004, he is a scientist working for the European Space Agency in charge of 2 satellites for scientific research, namely Herschel and Planck, which will be orbited in 2007 for observing temperature fluctuations in cosmological background radiation in far infrared and submillimeter wave frequencies. Dr. Scientific Research Guiderdoni focused on the problem of the birth and evolution of galaxies. The following is Philip Clayton's interview with Bruno Guiderdoni, excerpted, with permission from the chronicle Mizan, from the book Reading Nature Reading Verses, Mizan, 2004. Philip Clayton: what religious influences did you receive as a child, and how did you finally choose Islam? Guiderdoni: my father and mother are Christians, but I was not raised in any particular religion. As I studied science, I discovered there was something missing in the scientific approach to the world. As I searched for other types of knowledge, I realized that my search was a religious search. I don't know the conditions in America, but in France, modern education completely excludes the idea of God. As a consequence, young people are unable to explain what they feel. After much reading and traveling, it finally dawned on me that my search was a religious search. I am very interested in Eastern religions, especially their emphasis on the pursuit of knowledge. For me, being a Buddhist, Taoist, or Hindu is a step too far. Being a Muslim is a middle way between East and West. Islam introduces itself as a middle religion between Western religions, Judaism and Christianity, and Eastern religions. I feel, by embracing Islam, I am still in the same direction, which was started by Judaism and Christianity. But I also found my way into Eastern religions. I found my way in Islam, although, as you know, Islam is now plagued by many problems, especially by fundamentalist ideologies that use violence. Of course, there is also much value in Islam and many possibilities for a spiritual life. Clayton. So, the appeal of Islam is because it is an integration of Judaism and Christianity, but is also close to Eastern traditions. Guiderdoni. Correct. Especially Islamic mysticism called Sufism. Sufism places emphasis on the realization of knowledge in a very sympathetic way within a monotheistic framework, with theological concepts that are very familiar to us. In Islam, the view of humans, the world, and creation is very similar to that of Judaism and Christianity. Ultimately, the goal of religious life is knowledge. The very important thing is that both my quest for science and my quest for religion are quests for knowledge. Clayton. Can you talk a little bit about what you didn't get out of just the pursuit of scientific knowledge? Guiderdoni. In the 19th century, science hoped to answer all questions. Modern science has been very successful in answering questions about the mechanics of things. However, it begins to unsatisfy the question, why do things behave this way? Hope in the 19th century was not in real science, but in ideology. Now science focuses more on its main goal, namely the exploration of the universe. Modern science has little to say on a philosophical level. In the past century, all attempts to define the nature of scientific truth have proven to be utter failures. In science, we have very efficient methods to increase our knowledge about the universe. However, we cannot say that a theory is true, or possibly true, or false, or possibly false. Karl Popper's work is very important from this point of view. The answers to our scientific questions give rise to other questions. Science is an endless and very exciting story. Unfortunately, we humans are limited by time, and we want definitive answers to other questions. The search for such answers is natural, even if this search is not scientific, but religious. That is why I am very dissatisfied with the scientific activities that I do. Clayton. Is there anything about the limitations of knowledge that scientists themselves have emphasized hundreds of years ago that contributes to your understanding of the need for another way, beyond science? For example, the uncertainty about the quantum level proposed by Heisenberg. Guiderdoni. On my intellectual path, there are two important studies. The first is the philosophy of science, especially the works of Popper, which I read when I was 20. Another important step was the debate about the nature and perfection of quantum mechanics. In France, there was a lot of debate 10 or 20 years ago. Bernard d'Espagnat lectured at the university where I studied 15 years ago. I was impressed by his brilliance and intelligence, and especially by his analysis of the limitations of quantum mechanics, and by the idea that reality can never truly be uncovered by scientific inquiry. In fact, reality is always veiled. I think I need to try another way to gain knowledge of reality. Clayton. Since embracing Islam, how do you view the relationship between scientific and religious traditions? Do you see them as complementary, integral, or as very different areas? Guiderdoni. In my opinion, the two are complementary. As I told you, Islam really emphasizes the importance of knowledge in life in general and in religious life in particular. The root of sin is ignorance, or darkness. Seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave, said the Prophet. Julm is an Arabic term for sin and darkness. It is very possible for us to get out of sin with the light of knowledge. So, seeking knowledge is important. All kinds of knowledge. Knowledge of the world and knowledge of the afterlife. Maybe people think of scientific knowledge as knowledge of the world, and knowledge of the afterlife as religious knowledge. In reality, the difference is not so clear. In the Islamic tradition, the knowledge sought is knowledge that is useful for humanity in general. The pursuit of knowledge cannot be separated from ethical values. Like everything in the world, science has one goal, namely, God. We cannot understand the quest for knowledge separately from the pursuit of self-improvement. Clayton. So, your work as a scientist is not completely separate from your observance as a Muslim. Is that what you mean? Guiderdoni. Yes. There is no conflict between science and religion. There cannot be a case of Galileo in Islam. Islam is open to all kinds of knowledge. So, as a Muslim, I feel very comfortable with my scientific activities, because I can interpret my research work as a search for knowledge for this world, as well as an exploration of the richness and beauty of God's creation. Clayton. It sounds as though in Islam you found a need to reconcile your work as a scientist with your charity as a Muslim. Guiderdoni. Correct. As a Muslim, I tend to unite all activities into one single path, one way of life and thinking. Because God is one, humans must also be whole. Any kind of separation between professional activity and religious pursuits is not a good thing. We do not have to separate scientific activities from religious activities. It is not true that science and faith are unrelated to each other, that they are completely different ways of approaching reality. This view is one of the defects of several approaches to religion in Western civilization, especially after Kant. However, I must also emphasize that scientific knowledge is not like religious knowledge. At all times, we must be aware of the nature of the activity we are undertaking. We don't do prayer like we do research. Integrating our activities is important, but we also need differentiation. We must be careful in this matter. Clayton. So, the Kantian separation between the world of nature and the world of moral responsibility and freedom that has influenced much Christian and Jewish religious thought in the past 2 or 3 centuries is not accepted by Islam? Guiderdoni. No, because every human action has an ethical meaning. Religion pervades everyday life. There are times of explicit ritual, praying 5 times a day, for example. However, outside of these times, all of life is an opportunity for worship, in the form of exploring the world, and any kind of world exploration will advance knowledge. Because exploring the world is a way to learn about God's creation, this activity also has the value of worship. Clayton. For Islam, as for Judaism and Christianity, the universe has not only linear time, but also a certain telos, goal, Greek, a purpose ordained by God. How does the idea of purpose coexist with contemporary physics and astrophysics? Guiderdoni. In the Koran, many verses emphasize the purpose of God's creation. That purpose extends to the details of everyday life. Nothing is created by chance. Everything is made with one purpose. Everything is a sign of God. Verse. This word is one of the important words in Islamic tradition, which means that everything in the world, everything that is visible to us, actually carries lessons from God. So, once again, it is easy to examine modern science within this paradigm of finality. I was struck by the contrast between reductionism's success as a tool and as a methodological design, and its failure as a philosophical design. Our exploration of the details of the physics of the cosmos now leads to what can easily be read as finality. All coincidences that are interpreted by the anthropic principle can easily be read as finalities in the world. A Muslim certainly doesn't need to take the trouble to read it. The ones who get into trouble are the unbelievers, because they understand this world as a giant building that stands on a very small number of finely tuned pillars, the values of physical constants. That's the problem for them. Clayton. What arguments do you use as a physicist regarding the existence of design and purpose in the universe? Guiderdoni. There has been a lot of work on the anthropic principle, which is well summarized in John Barrow's book, The Anthropic Cosmological Principle. Historically, the vastness of the universe has been used as an argument against religion. The reason is, if the universe were so vast, humans would be meaningless, and the concept of a revealed religion on the small planet where we live would have no meaning. However, we now know that the age and size of the observable universe is closely related to our presence on Earth. We cannot appear in a universe that is a different age and size from the universe we inhabit now. The very old age of the universe is necessary for the enrichment of heavy elements and is also important for the formation of planets and the emergence of life. The size of the universe is a consequence of its age. We need a universe size like the size of our universe, and a time as long as the age of our universe, so that we, humans, can appear on Earth. Clayton. Some people provide physical arguments in defense of what is usually called the strong anthropic principle. Are you sympathetic to the view that the emergence of intelligent life is an inevitability that was designed in the universe from the beginning? Guiderdoni. Yes, I agree. That, I think, is an inevitable consequence of recent work in modern cosmology. All these coincidences in physical constants make enormous complexity possible. As a person of faith, I adhere to strong anthropic principles. Everything has been designed in a certain way to make human existence possible. Clayton. May I ask about the nature of that principle? Some people say that it is a metaphysical explanation. Some say it is really a conclusion from physics, that we can get this principle from physics without having to turn to metaphysics. Guiderdoni. For now, I would say that it is not a principle of physics. It's something rooted in science, but it's a metaphysical principle. Indeed, this is a surprising turn towards metaphysics, for many philosophers have argued that we have killed metaphysics since the emergence of Kantian philosophy at the end of the 18th century. Now, metaphysics is being resurfaced when least expected, by science itself. In my opinion, the anthropic principle cannot be considered a physical principle, because physical principles must be predictable. I don't know if any predictions from the anthropic principle have emerged. However, of course, we cannot eliminate it just because this principle has metaphysical meaning. Clayton. In the science of the past decade, as you describe, metaphysical conclusions were influenced by the work of astrophysics, perhaps even testable in certain ways. Physical research can actually provide evidence for some metaphysical insights. Am I describing your stance correctly? Guiderdoni. Yes, you are right. The tendency in Islam has always been towards unification. Thus, the statement that metaphysics can be completely excluded from any field of human activity or knowledge is completely inconsistent with Islamic thought. From the point of view of modern science, which at least in past centuries sought to eliminate metaphysics, the return of metaphysics is a surprise. Islamic thought emphasizes the close relationship between the description of the universe and its roots in metaphysical and spiritual principles. The success of reductionism as a scientific methodology and its failure as a philosophical design became a strong impetus for the search for other types of science, other ways of seeing the single truth. In my opinion, all Islamic thought leads to the conclusion that there is only one truth. To achieve this, we have many ways. One of them is science. Both his successes and failures are encouraging. Its failure, in the form of the absence of radical answers, may be an incentive to move on to other ways of obtaining the truth. Maybe the religious path is special in some ways. In my opinion, modern philosophy does not emphasize the search for truth. It is marked by the disappearance of metaphysics. So, perhaps religion is the only way left for scientists to try to obtain the truth. Clayton. So, perhaps you could say it like this, that as a scientist, I am amazed at the improbability that I, as a person who knows, should be here. When I look at the universe, it seems as if it is carefully tuned, so that life can develop. Then, I learned about the anthropic principle in physics, or the importance of the observer's position in the field of quantum physics, so I thought there must be some purpose for us. I turned away from religion to find out what its purpose was and what my moral responsibility was before God. Is that your idea? Guiderdoni. Exactly. I don't like dualistic interpretations of science, especially regarding quantum mechanics. I like reality. I am a realist. We suspect that there is a hidden reality, a veiled reality, as D'Espagnac puts it. We are trying to get closer to this reality through science, and we are succeeding in some ways. However, we feel that we need a qualitative step that will lead us to questions about the meaning of things. In my opinion, we can only get answers through a religious approach, and this is why I view the two activities as truly complementary. Clayton. Islam, like Western religions, teaches that human beings were created to be morally responsible, free, and able to relate to God. How can this understanding of humans as individuals be said to be in accordance with the latest scientific theories? Guiderdoni. This is a related question. Humans are described in the Koran as God's representatives on earth, so he is not above creation. It might be said that in Western civilization, especially the Cartesian worldview, only humans have souls. Then he can do whatever he wants in this world. In Islam, humans are not above creation, but at its center. And we must manage that creation, in the name of God, like good gardeners. We are responsible for creation, and cannot change it as we wish. Humans are on this earth as a consequence of a number of extraordinary crises in the development of the universe. Crises in the formation of galaxies, the formation of stellar spectra, the evolution of stars, and so on, up to the formation of planets and the emergence of life, as well as entire periods of life's development and so on. Science teaches that we are at the top of a giant cosmic edifice, 10 billion years old. Islam helps me feel comfortable because of its emphasis on knowledge and ethical values. Knowledge cannot be achieved separately from the search for ethical values. The true ethical value is responsibility. So, this scientific view, which says that humans are the result of so-called coincidences and extraordinary crises, should lead us to a religious view that views humans as having a great sense of responsibility on Earth. Apart from that, a very interesting thing is the appearance of humans in cosmology. The cosmological principle states that a place far away is no different from here. There is no special position in the universe. However, this brings the possibility of exploring the history of the universe. Due to the fact that far away is the same as here, the history of the universe can be traced by observing objects at high redshifts. This also means that long distances provide images of the very past, because light travels at a finite speed. We can reconstruct the past of the universe and our own past, right down to the first moments after the Big Bang. So, we are in a central position. We are at the center of the observable universe. In some ways, our cosmos is very similar to the cosmos of the Middle Ages, which placed humans at the center of the universe. Of course, we know that the world is infinite. However, the observable world is a bubble in the vastness of the universe. We are in such a central position in our efforts to build our knowledge of the world. In other words, we are in a suitable location for observing the universe because the plane of our galaxy, for example, has a good vantage point over the plane of the local supercluster. We are not in a molecular cloud and so on. The universe that surrounds us, the Milky Way galaxy, is somewhat translucent. And we can access the very past. If we lived in another galaxy, or in a molecular cloud, the universe around us would be completely opaque, except for infrared light radiation and radio waves. There are definitely more obstacles to uncovering this universe. There are many similarities in the way we see the world to the way the Middle Ages saw it. For medieval thinkers, the boundary of the universe was the celestial sphere, or more precisely the crystalline sphere, due to the discovery of the precession of the equinoxes. This is a very sharp demarcation, a separation between the universe on the one hand and the empyreum, locus of God's throne, on the other. This is the maximum limit for creation. And we also have this limit because the limit of the universe that we can observe is shaped like a circle. On the surface of the sphere, we get T0 and we cannot see any further. Even further away is the past that is too far away. That's when the big explosion happened, which is a mystery to modern cosmology. We know that the world is limitless and full of stars and galaxies, but we have a dynamic view of the universe, a close connection between gazing at great distances and delving into the past. When we look far away, we try to explore the origins of our permanent existence as Dante Alighieri allegorically describes himself traveling through space to see the face of God. There are many other similarities between medieval views and modern science regarding the universe. Clayton. I wonder how our knowledge of the evolution of life impacts religious views of individuals. According to evolutionary biology, we are very similar to other higher primates. Most of our genetic material is the same as theirs. Does this create tension in religious beliefs regarding the uniqueness of the individual as a representative of God? Guiderdoni. Maybe there would be some kind of tension if you read the Koran literally. However, this will disappear if we examine the verses openly. The creation of humans is described in the Koran as follows. Humans were created by God from two elements. He was created from clay, thin, and the Spirit of God, Ruh. This creation process was previously interpreted as instantaneous creation. However, none of the instructions in the sacred verses require us to arrive at this conclusion, because everything described by the theory of evolution could be related to part of cosmic evolution from the beginning, from nucleosynthesis in stars and so on, and the fact that our elements, clay, existed in stars 5 billion years ago. This piece of clay makes us very close to this world, very close to animals. We also have another part, namely the Spirit of God. This Spirit is a gift from God, and that is not the only reason. Aristotle said that humans are thinking animals, but thought is not the only difference. Unlike animals, humans have the capacity to know God, to be aware of His names and His attributes. In the Islamic tradition, humans are the only creatures in this world who have the ability to realize all of God's attributes, all of His attributes. This is the gift of God's Spirit within us. In Islam, there is nothing that causes opposition to the possibility that the shape and characteristics of humans, which are the same as animals, animal elements, are the result of a long evolutionary process. The Quran does not tell world history. It is a special book, a book that draws human attention to significant facts. This is not a scientific textbook. Parts of the Quran are very poetic and mysterious, and the verses can be read in various ways. During the Middle Ages, the Quran was often read literally, very much like how Jews or Christians did. However, these verses are always open to interpretation and rereading. The Quran states that there was a time when humans were not yet created. Humans were created for God, but the universe was created for humans, to be the place, locus, of our knowledge about God. The creation of humanity may have taken place over a very long time, but time is not truly significant from a spiritual perspective. What is important is what is happening now and our ability to understand God's actions in the universe. Clayton. So stories about how things came to be and how humans are different from animals are less important in Islam than they are in Christianity? The important issue is how humans currently understand before God, and how they live and behave. Is that so? Guiderdoni. Yes, I think so. In Islam, there is an emphasis on spiritual realization. This spiritual realization is equally important in Buddhist and Hindu teachings. As Westerners, we are used to dealing with many problems, some of which have nothing to do with us. Even though we achieve success in exploring the universe, the goal of our creation is not the discovery of the universe. We have no extraordinary description of the history of the universe. However, despite these discoveries, something important was forgotten: man's spiritual realization. Therefore, we need more knowledge than science can provide. We in the West are used to thinking that we can only know what we can formulate into concepts. Eastern religions, including Islam, which is an Eastern religion from this point of view, teach that we can know more than we can conceptualize. Of course, we, Western nations, are very good at using our reasoning. However, we also have other types of intelligence. We have what medieval philosophers called intellect, that is, the ability to contemplate truth. So, if we want to find out the origins of our existence, we can get various answers. We get answers based on modern cosmology. We also have a spiritual and mystical approach. Complete answers can only be found in the afterlife, which according to Islamic tradition is also a world of knowledge. On Earth, we are limited by the laws of nature, and we can only get partial answers to important questions. In the afterlife, direct knowledge will be revealed. Clayton. And we will also get spontaneous intuition from the intellectus. While in this world we only have limited ways of knowing, with modern reason and analysis, not with synthesis. Guiderdoni. Exactly. We, Western nations, are very successful in the field of algorithms. However, we forget that there is another way. Intelligence is not only analytical, but also has a synthetic side, as you said earlier. It also deals with the mysteries of scientific creativity and scientific discovery. How can an idea form in the mind of a scientist? This is a big question. We can teach our students a lot about science, but we cannot teach them how to discover, because we completely forget the contemplative side of the human mind and human activity in general. In religion, we rediscover the importance of the path of contemplation. Clayton. Can charity and religious devotion make us more creative and add to the analytical side a more holistic way of thinking? Guiderdoni. I think it's possible. We have examples of highly creative saints, not just in Islam, of course, but in all religions. We have the impression that certain types of charity can open the horizons of thinking, or help the mind remove obstacles related to lust, and so on. Maybe charity like this can make someone more creative and more efficient in this world. But again, that is not the primary aim of religious charity. The main goal is not the discovery of this world, but charity in the world in the name of God. Through that, we can find God. Clayton. The basic belief of Islam is that God is not only the creator, but, in a sense, also the ruler. In other words, he is the ruler of the universe. Has this kind of understanding of God changed in the Islamic tradition after coming into contact with modern science, or has it remained unaffected? Is there any opposition to this belief and activity of God due to the development of our knowledge of the physical world? Guiderdoni. This is a very complicated question, and there are various answers, according to the historical period we are considering. Today, there is no debate between science and Islamic theology, because Islamic theology has almost disappeared. Currently we, the Islamic world, are in difficult times. There are two main tendencies in Islamic thought today. The first can be called the rationalistic tendency, or modernism, which accepts the results of modern science without being critical. This tendency takes the form of a comprehensive acceptance of all the results of modern thought and technology, without critical efforts to question whether these results are in accordance with Islamic thought or theology. The second tendency is a fundamentalist perspective. Everything that comes from Western civilization is considered bad just because it comes from the West. Fundamentalists want to build Islamic science that is in harmony with modern science. Fundamentalists consider modern science to be Western science or Christian science. This is completely contrary to the extraordinary intellectual and spiritual traditions of Islam. Unfortunately, debate in the modern Islamic world is very rare. There must be a third way between these two extreme ways of looking at things. Unfortunately, most Muslim thinkers are more interested in social problems than fundamental problems because Islamic countries face so many economic and social problems. So, most reflections in Islam center on these issues. But in fact, historically, and for very good reasons, the tendency of Islamic theology is to discuss fundamental problems first. We cannot deal with social or economic problems well without reflecting on fundamental problems first. This is a major weakness of modern Islamic thought, and is the reason why modern Islamic reflection on social and economic problems is often not deep. That is also the reason why we have been led to the current situation of violence. Basically, Islamic philosophy had disappeared by the end of the Middle Ages. Islamic thought experienced a setback except in the field of Sufism. In this plane, the reflection is always there, but it is a little hidden. It's not easy to find a good book or someone to reflect on your question. Clayton. Do you understand the work you do as part of an effort to help change Islamic theology, to think more about this question? For example, your work with French television? Guiderdoni. I think that in Europe we are better equipped to answer these kinds of questions because we have the intellectual foundations. We live with these kinds of questions. Maybe we are better prepared to think more calmly, because we don't have to face the serious economic and political problems faced by many Muslim countries. Therefore, we have the opportunity to discuss. For example, I often lecture on these issues in mosques and meet many young Muslims who grew up in Europe and have received Western cultural education. They look forward to this kind of reflection because it is necessary. Clayton. So, if we proceed from the assumption that Islamic thought in this area is in its infancy and that the answers that emerge must be highly speculative in the eyes of a Muslim, what is your personal opinion regarding the relationship between God, God's activity in the world, and physical descriptions of reality? Guiderdoni. The Quran does not explain this in too much detail, but there are two verses that seem particularly relevant to me. One verse states that God created the world mathematically. The Quran says that the sun and moon circulate according to a calculation, QS al-Rahman. There are numbers in the universe. The Quran draws the reader's attention to all the regularities in the universe. There are also another verse which states that nothing changes in God's creation. This means that there is order that we see in nature, because there was order from the beginning, and this can be identified, of course, with the natural laws created by God. God makes natural laws possible. God is the maintainer of natural laws, order that continues. There is another very beautiful verse. This verse states that we will not be able to find gaps in God's creation, because God Himself is the order. God is beauty. And the beauty that we see in the universe is a reflection of God's beauty. This is the first one. The second point, which is not surprising, is that this order is fundamentally intellectual. They were formed by an intelligence that also created our intelligence. Therefore, it is not surprising that we are able to explore the universe, because the universe is not a foreign land. He is no different from us. We in the universe were created by the same intelligence. Clayton. Can this way of thinking lead us to a view that God controls the universe not in the form of direct actions, but in the form of an initial creation of an order that then shapes the nature of the world in subsequent times? Or is it necessary to maintain the concept of God's continuous action? Guiderdoni. In Islamic theology, there is a doctrine called the renewal of creation at every moment. The reason is that order in the world does not simply exist. They could not walk if God did not renew them every moment. This idea is also found in Western philosophy under the name actionalism. Islamic theology uses the ideas of atomistic physics, so of course it is quite similar to our current view of the universe, which is also atomistic. However, classical Ash'ariya theology, which developed during the 19th and 10th centuries AD, stated that God created atoms and accidents at all times. Thus, atoms do not have the ability to act on other atoms because there are not enough atoms to exist. Causality is completely established by God. There is a classic example given by Imam al-Ghazali, one of the great Islamic thinkers. He said that fire basically does not have the ability to burn a sheet of paper. If we bring fire close to a piece of paper, we see the paper burn. But this is not because we brought the fire close to the paper. This is God's will, because fire has no capacity within itself to burn. This is a powerful statement, and completely at odds with the way we view causality in the world. We can accept that God created the world by causality, by laws, but we feel that after the moment of creation, God allowed the laws to run their course mechanistically. Classical Islamic theology states that ultimately the debate about causality is very complicated and essentially metaphysical. Who created natural laws? Do the laws of nature lie in matter? Why must there be natural laws? Newton said that the law of gravity is possible because God exists and maintains the law of gravity, so that it remains at all times. Ultimately, I think Islamic theology is the same. The problems of causality and the immutability of physical laws are the main questions that our philosophy cannot solve. Westerners tend to imagine natural law as an approximate description of a few regularities in the world. In this perspective, matter will be dominated by causes and coincidences, and we try to explain it by groping. However, in the Islamic theological perspective, natural laws are the content of the universe. Order, symmetry, and conservation laws, these are all just our explanations, our way of thinking about matter. This is because matter is created by the intellect. It is created with symmetry and mathematics. Clayton. How amazing. Now let me turn to the final question, a personal question. In what ways do your religious beliefs motivate your scientific work, and do scientific or astrophysical research inspire your religious beliefs? Guiderdoni. Perhaps the first steps on a spiritual journey will be disappointed by a number of unanswered questions, and we try to seek knowledge in other ways. For example, by making a pilgrimage to Eastern countries, abandoning all modern life and retreating to a monastery or hermitage. However, that is a denial of reality. My religious training has taught me that we must accept reality as it is, within our limits. However, we must also accept all its beauty and richness. Science has many limitations, but it also has great beauty and fascination. This is the reason why I continue to pursue it and hope to develop myself in the future. However, I see both of these activities as leading to the same reality.